two kinds of attention to the world at once. Now, that may not sound like a big deal, but the fact that there's a different way of attending changes everything, because how you attend governs what you find. Attention is really just the way we dispose our awareness of the world, and you can do it in two fundamental ways. And so effectively, these two ways of attending to the world build completely different images, takes, whatever you like to call them, of the world in our mind.
Kalepa, thank you, brother. Kalepa is the one who made this for me. Why? It's backwards, left, right brain stuff.
One of them is like the left hemisphere's world is like a map.
Paradigmatic mind is where you're switching from paradigm to paradigm, which is map to map, map to map to map to map. So left, right brain, right? The map and the territory.
It's a highly abstract, stylized, diagrammatic version of reality that is not like a picture of reality, but a diagram that helps you, or a map that helps you negotiate the world.
Oh, a particular group or tribe or set of beliefs or whatever it is, we're working with very partial two-dimensional models, right? We're working with the predictive processing thing. We're working with a like sketch.
Mm-hmm.
You have an understanding of reality, of what is, of the world, that helps you to navigate the world, but it's not synonymous. It's not identical to what the world is. So that's why it's the map and it's not the territory.
It's purely for utility.
And so a paradigm, a framework, a way of seeing the world is a narratival interpretation of the world that helps you to navigate the world. But I would argue that it's necessarily utilitarian because it assumes or presumes maybe a goal. Like, I have a map for a reason.
It wouldn't get better if it had more detail in it. A map would be totally useless if it had loads of information in it. It just has to stick to the things you need to know. Whereas the right hemisphere is seeing everything else. So it's seeing the full experiential picture of life in all its depth, with all its moral and aesthetic and other modes of being. So clearly, if we live in the map, we live in a very jejune, a very simplified, skeletal, inanimate kind of a version of the world.
And then transcendent mind is the mind that I would say is where the right brain is the master. It's what I call iconic knowing. You can have paradigms, but your way of operating in the world is not limited to the totalizing Ouroboros of the map of the paradigm. It's not a mechanistic, systemic thing. It's a tonal thing.
And not to lose that while the left hemisphere is busy, like one's personal computer, grinding out an answer. Like the computer, it doesn't really understand the answer, but it can do it quickly. And so it's useful. There's nothing wrong with it. It's actually vital. That's why it was appointed, as it were, by the master to be the emissary. She has a better idea of what is going on overall. So it's back to the image of the right knowing and sending an emissary to do the dirty work of the nitty-gritty bits, but to stick to that and not try and become the master.
All right, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to start capturing the various YouTube clips. That's where I want to start.
And the license plate of the state of New Hampshire says, "Live free or die." This is the motto of my neighboring state. Makes the point unmistakably clear. I want to draw your attention to the fact that the moose can't contemplate that fact.
All these people trying to step on my turf. Where were you in the middle of December? That cold, dark winter when no one was there to stream. And you were with your family. I'm the untriggerable. You can't trigger me. You're not going to trigger me.
And that's an important biological difference between us and the moose, between us and every other species of the planet.
I didn't realize how many of these that I actually had found. It's a lot.
Is stuck with the literal. And that means also that the right hemisphere is much better at understanding metaphor. And metaphors are crucially important in language. Indeed, all language is metaphorical in its nature. I'm a follower of Lakoff and Johnson's.
This one. Metaphors we live by. Right? Here it is. There's the book. This book gave me some ideas.
Now, times can be coming towards you. You speak of the flow of time. Why is it that Tuesday follows Monday and that Monday precedes Tuesday? Here's Tuesday. Here's Monday. They're coming towards you. Tuesday is following Monday. Which way is Monday facing? Got to be facing towards you. So its back is here, so Tuesday can be following it. You project onto times, you project faces, fronts and backs.
Belief that language is essentially metaphorical.
Which is why you can face the future, confident.
Accepting the truth of the universe, accepting the truth about life.
You can't handle the truth!
A lot of things are metaphor that you probably don't realize. And why would you? Because it doesn't matter. It really doesn't. It does not matter. But I can say something like, I've lost my creativity. I did. I lost it. I don't know where it went. I can't find it right now. It's almost as if it sprouted legs and has run away. And so I need to set out some little pieces of bread on the water so that the little ducklings come home and get their snacks. Because ducks like bread. And everybody knows it. Ducks like bread. I don't know what to say.
Bleak as it may be, there is a nobility. You stand up and face into the keen wind of the truth. And I think that is a noble and an actually aesthetically pleasing thing to do anyway.
All right, Fred, you can take your hands out of your ears.
And that guy gets angry, and he's like focused, and he almost had this sort of like you know when someone's working and they don't want to be bothered, and they're doing their thing and they're involved and they don't have time for you.
I'm judgy, right? We're all. I hope.
Not me.
This is true.
That's how this guy was in my dream. He was treating me like that.
Yeah, dude.
So like every now and then I think of that guy and I'm like, oh, that's like part of me. That's like, I have this desire to like create some of this stuff and make some of these videos and do this. And it's like,
geez. Yeah.
So
autodidact. Yep.
Well, that's where like my weird background story like really does like come into play.
Here comes pieces of mine.
Our camera stopped rolling immediately after the blast. The humor of the entire situation suddenly gave way to a run for survival as huge chunks of whale blubber fell everywhere.
There's a drivenness about it, and when I get in those modes, I really do get into like a flow state.
It was milk or paint.
Sure, yeah.
Or hair. And because you just, and people would say, what, milk or paint or hair?
And I'm like in the zone, and I could stay there for like, if I got in there and I was uninterrupted, I could be in there like 8, 10 hours, 12 hours a day.
But you begin to realize that that reality is not what we think it is. And yes. It sounds like through the box, that was sort of your entry into another world.
Yeah.
But I have interruptions in my life, so the process is always interrupted. And some of that.
Pieces of meat passed high over our heads while others were falling at our feet. The dunes were rapidly evacuated as spectators escaped both the falling debris and the overwhelming smell. A parked car over a quarter of a mile from the blast site was the target of one large chunk. The passenger compartment literally smelled.
And that's what I mean by I don't know what this video is about. I don't know exactly what it is, other than I found a connection by reading through the Metaphors We Live By book.
I think the left hemisphere envisages only the sort of thing it can know. I actually call the left hemisphere's generated world a hall of mirrors because it doesn't see anything outside of what it itself has created. The left hemisphere pays piecemeal attention, a kind of attention to the world. One narrow, targeted, piecemeal, highly targeted, highly focused on a detail. And this is because its aim is to get and grab. It's this tiny area of our mental life, which is the bit of which we are now conscious, which has been estimated to be less than 0.5% of all that we know and experience. One is to pay enormous attention to a detail that you want to do something to. Eat it, catch it, pick it up, use it. Stuff. And to do that, you need to be able to be precise in picking it up, having it, whether it's food, whether it's a tool, whatever it is. So it enables us to do the business of grabbing and getting, not made up of little moments of... it knows how to put things together and make something. And so it decides that the world must be made like that from little bits. That awareness doesn't know about anything outside of what it is it's aware of. If you stop at where the left hemisphere is, you're left with a bunch of meaningless fragments of senseless data, which leads people who have stopped at that point to say, oh, the world's just made up of little bit of excitement where I want to get something. And it's the hemisphere that controls the right hand with which we do most of our grabbing and getting. And it also is the part of the brain that controls that aspect of language with which we pin things down. You could put that, I mean, it's not really better at communicating, because communication is a very subtle business. When I speak to you, you're taking in all the things my right hemisphere does, which is to make my voice not sound like a computer-generated. Yes. Or I say, yes, or yes, or... so you're getting my tone of voice, my facial expression, my body language. You're also getting jokes, you're getting metaphors, you're understanding what's going on. So actually communication is much more the right hemisphere's thing.
It's more effective at communicating at low resolutions, though, or at definitely communicating at scale, simplifying the world into a lower resolution version of what it is.
And so it decides that the world must be made like that from little bits. And in doing so, it completely misunderstands its nature, and it produces that kind of cocksure certainty, which is surely the sign of a lack of wisdom. One of the signs of wisdom is that one feels less certain that one knows, rather than more certain that one knows, in general.
Putting it out there, easier to understand. Yeah, I can see. I mean, that's a satisfactory explanation. I like easy ways to remember things. So competition, coordination, and communication. Keeping those there is going to help me to do that.
Every time I try to find the wave, right? Every time I try to artificially control the wave, I don't find it. I lose it, and then this frustrates me because I know what I've done. Right, I know that I have purposely tried to artificially create the next wave of obsession. Like I did that, and I know that I did that. And every time that I try to do that is when I don't have a wave to ride. I missed it, and that is the truth of all this. It's more like you wait for the next wave to come through. There's always waves coming through. Right, there is no end to the waves coming through.
Oftentimes, I think so. The reaction videos are kind of interesting because when I first started watching them, it would be like watching. What would interest me was watching African Americans listening to heavy metal.
First of all, no warnings at all about this one, bro. I thought it was gonna be beautiful, but I see what we getting into now. Hold up. Lock and loaded.
Whatever song.
Right. Yeah. And because, like I have frames in my mind about how people think, right? So I think, Well, this person looks like this, so they only probably listen to this kind of music. I wonder what would happen if they listened to this music. Like, what do they see? Are they going to see what I see?
Look around. Someone here has what you need. And if you can only figure out who it is, you can make a novel connection to move them into a new level of creativity.
Anyway, I have no idea where this...
But that set off so many bells in terms, because I mean, that framing of the binary between reality and fiction just reminded me so much of just this kind of nominalism trap that we've been in the modern world, of this distinction between physical reality and then mental stuff just being fake. And it reminded me of when that actually broke for me, which was through Peterson and also through Vervaeke's work, through relevance realization, essentially.
Relevance realization, today's leading distributor of sense and cognition, a framework that helps you focus on relevant aspects of the world while ignoring irrelevant information. Relevance realization, turning ill-defined problems into well-defined problems.
To understand that is so, like, a lot of Peterson's work rings true to that in terms of that it's such, like, basic story structure. I mean,
all of it happens magically and automatically. And the stories we tell ourselves about us doing it, it's just stories. We're part of it. If we're not there, it doesn't happen through us.
Like default operating system in a way of this kind of low resolution categorical system that we use.
Put them on and look through them. And that's really what, like, the ancient Greeks were also about. Like, the theoria has the sense of looking deeply into reality. And you can imagine it's not just about just awareness of everything, but also using that awareness to then think and I don't just mean think in this logistical sense, but like spiritually think, maybe almost.
Yeah.
In the sense that DC Schindler told you that thinking can be a spiritual exercise, that you can look into reality in that sense. This is what the Greeks had the nous for, like the noetic type of.
And she said, on the way over here, my boyfriend said that our relationship has hit a dead-end street. She said, I don't know what this means. It's very upsetting to me. So we said, hey, look, if it's hit a dead-end street, you can't keep going the way you've been going. You may have to turn back. And then we realized that there were a whole lot of expressions in English in which love is conceptualized as a journey. For example, the marriage is on the rocks. It's off the tracks. We're spinning our wheels. It's been a long, bumpy road. We're at a crossroads in this relationship. We're going in different directions. We may have to bail out.
Because ducks like bread, that's why you can't pick what to do next, right? You can't. We have to find it, and so hopefully we can find it together. And we're going to somewhat walk through how this is all going to work. And hopefully by the end of it, we'll have made something worth putting out there.
Absolutely. We don't know.
Right.
So I say I love wrestling. One of the reasons is it's the closest thing to what reality is.
That don't understand kayfabe, can you give me one? Santa
Claus is kayfabe.
Okay, thank you.
It's like everybody plays along so that the people who don't know any better have a better time of it. And that just fractals out into how human society works in general. It's like, you'd like to kill that guy, but just play along with nobody kills anybody and everybody has a better time of it.
Is this fake sport? This fake sport is the closest thing to what reality actually is.
You're watching it, your framing dies with the framing of the character. You're like, oh my God, I am this character. The character faces that moment where they have to discard the dream they've been living, and you do a little bit as well.
It's absolutely right. I think that's really true. And I don't think it happens in this sort of moralizing sense, right? Like, I don't think you're standing apart and saying, well, this person's acting this way and I judge that to be unwise. It's like, no, you're implicated. You're walking it with them. And I don't even think that the connection, the sort of recursive throwback onto yourself and your own life, I don't even think it's always conscious.
After the talk, which was kind of fun because like many of my students were there, so it was like wild to sort of like that they were also confronted like, wait, you have internet fans? And I was like, I didn't know I had internet fans. Like, oh, that was a thing. Maar dat probeer ik het even heel erg alledaags te maken. Dus laten we zeggen een doordeweekse dag en je komt thuis en je trekt, dus je trekt de kast open en je ziet een zak chips staan, top, je pakt een bakje chips, heerlijk, en je geniet ervan. Maar dan ook na een paar minuten merk je eigenlijk al van, moet ik nog een bakje chips nemen? En je merkt toch dat er een stemmetje in je opkomt die zegt van, doe het niet. En de ander zegt, ja, doe het wel.
The kind of attention that the right hemisphere is able to give sees a living web of interrelationships. So it sees that nothing is just what it is outside of a context. This just is good. But there's nothing that just is good. Things are good only in a context. When you take them out of the context or push them too far, things become unbalanced. They fall out of harmony. And as in music, you get a terrible discord. Really what he is pointing out is how poetry is able to convey so powerfully so many things that simple prose can't, because of the ambiguities that it is able to capture. And so it is sparking off many different layers of meaning at the same time. But always is what it is because of the relations in which it stands to everything else. And indeed, in the matter of things, I argue that relations are primary. They come before the relata, the things that are said to be related. So they actually emerge out of a web of meaning, and that meaning is often implicit, whereas the left hemisphere doesn't understand what's not made explicit. That don't mean anything. That's because their right hemisphere, with which they could put together the context and see everything in context, would be able to understand it. So that's one point, that they see things differently. And the other is that the less you see, the more you think you know. This is actually a phenomenon in human psychology known as the Dunning-Kruger effect. People who really don't know very much think they know everything. As people begin to know more and more, they see that they know less and less. And as I sometimes say, that means that to a speculator, it means dollars. But to a physicist, it's 99.99% space. And the other 0.01%, we don't really know exactly what it is. Now, these are all perfectly reasonable ways of seeing the mountain. They're each real. The question is, which is the real one? And the answer is there isn't a single real one. The attention changes what it is that we see. Now, that might sound to the very left hemisphere analytical mind as though, well, that's confusing. That's just going to get in the way of the truth. But what if the truth is, in fact, multiple, complex, and needs things to be held in the mind together, even if to our everyday mind, they seem to be contrary to one another. And of course, that then becomes the favored mode in future. If I find that it's very useful to look at something in a certain way, then I automatically adopt this in future. So you get a vicious circle that if you start off by, for example, supposing that a very clinically detached manipulative attention works for you, that must be the best way of attending. But it only is the best way of attending if you want to manipulate something and remain remote from it. This is also a facet of our culture, that things have to be spelt out in language that, as it were, a machine could understand. But in fact, almost everything that matters to us can't be subjected in this way to a translation or a degradation.
My brain has stopped working. Sorry, 1 second.
So good. In this space that we call TLC. is way weirder than you think. And
we'll see.
you know, so like It would not surprise me if you said you joined the Druids and you went out into the woods and you sacrificed a goat. Like, I'd be like, that's interesting, but like, it wouldn't surprise me. Okay, so that's the level of weirdness that this community.
If you think about everything you need to be understanding, thinking about, and so on in a conversation, think of you're listening to me now and I'm talking to you. It is not the case that I know what the end of this sentence is as I'm saying it. I may be saying something and have no idea when I start to say it, how I'm going to wind up, but somehow I'm going to finish it.
I experienced it as beautiful, and what I found cool about it is that every time it was my turn to notice something, I really didn't know what I was going to say until, you open your eyes and you're actually noticing. And
when I talk face to face, I don't even know what I'm going to say. In fact, when I speak, right, it's an attempt to say something, but I only find out after I've said it if I said anything, right? Like, it's this qualitative spot of otherness, ambiguity, right? All these things that now it's also, there's a component to conversation that's deeply normative, right? That's why communication is filled with repetitions and all those kinds of things, but it's got this indeterminacy at the same time. It's this kind of sweet spot between the two. And if you think about it, those conversations, those interactions are how we go from an infant into a genuine human being.
so it really pulls you into the moment. That's really cool. And that makes it feel like there's sort of like a fifth presence of something guiding you. And so, yeah, it is highly recommended.
Not only that, you don't know how it's going to wind up, but somehow or other you have to bring to bear your knowledge of the phonology of the language, its sound structure, and all the rules of sound, your knowledge of the grammar of the language, of the words of the language, the context, and everything else you know to understand what I'm saying. And you can't be doing that consciously.
But we've decontextualized everything. We now don't understand that a thing is not just a thing. It changes its nature depending on the context that it's in. When we take it out of the context in which it belongs and from which it derives its meaning, it no longer seems to have any meaning. So the trouble with this world picture is it sees meaningless items whose only possible value can come from ways in which we can use them. And this has largely dominated, certainly in certain sectors, the way in which people now think of the natural world as a heap of resource. Alienated ourselves from nature and started calling it the environment, which literally means something around you. But no, it's not around you, it's in you and you are in it. We are nature, that's what we come from and where we return. Which we can mine and use and exploit for effectively utilitarian purposes.
There's something about this creative act. And I don't know what it is. I don't think anybody truly understands it.
Say, as you have hinted, oh man, all is one, and I say yes, and all is many, now what?
I was like, all right, so a box is to space what a word is to perception.
And we need both, either or, and both and.
It's the non-duality that includes duality. So,
You know the fellow's name?
Yes.
Well, then who's playing first?
Yes.
I mean, the fellow's name on first base.
Who?
The fellow playing first base for St. Louis.
Who?
The guy on first base.
Who is on first?
Well, what are you asking me for?
I'm not asking you, I'm telling you, who is on first?
I'm asking you who's on first.
That's the man's name.
That's whose name?
Someone says, this sounds like a way of always evading being wrong, because if you say something and then it turns out to be incorrect, you can always just retort back, well, it's incorrect, but it's also correct because there's contradictory elements to reality. And so you just have to view it from that point of view.
No, not either or both and. So we're not forced to make a decision between these two ways of thinking, but we need them both.
By reducing it to a word, reduces it. And it can't be reduced to a word. Not that any idea, I think, can truly be reduced to a word.
And which brings me to a really strange idea called the cosmological burrito. Okay, I'll tell you what the cosmological burrito is. It's that in the burrito you have the rice, the beans, you have the tortilla, you have all of these different ingredients, right? And we have such this incredible gift where we can just kind of, we could go to the taco truck if you want, and you can order the burrito, or you can make it. And oftentimes we get these things and we don't think of where they came from. And like this tremendous, incredible gift that you have of, you could just like have a burrito if you're lucky enough to have one and just enjoy that, right? But you don't think that, oh yeah, well, like what about the guy on the truck who's making the burrito? What is his family life like? And what was his whole entire life and existence like, right? You don't think about that. You don't think about that or what his parents' entire lives were. You don't think about the tires on the truck itself.
Becomes essential and indispensable. It's not some kind of accessory or luxury. It's like there's some deep symbolic necessity in gathering oneself together poetically.
Like actually like ontology and like...
Ontology, although I'm not exactly sure I understand the word ontology yet, but I mean, it makes sense from, at least from my frame. And then like there's a stack of, it just kind of like this this unfurling of like of relationality.
A machine apart, and I can put all the pieces on the floor, and I now know what the parts are that go to make that machine. But in taking it apart, I've lost their relationships, because the relationships are only there when the whole machine is constituted. And it's the relationships that are crucial, not only in helping us understand what that machine is and does, but also in helping us understand what those things we call the parts are, because they only become what they are because of the context in which they inhere.
I have a leaning toward idealism, and I like to talk about memory, and really sort of, if anyone wants to, hear my very strong claim that I think memories do not exist.
Hey, remember Ghostbusters? Oh, I remember Slimy?
I do remember this. This was a sort of like time dilation moment in my life looking back on it. You can hear me rant about why I think memories don't exist. But
that's interesting.
What if everything you thought you knew about memory was wrong? Because I'm pretty sure it is. The way that memory works is every single time you recall something, it becomes malleable, right? It gets pulled from all the different regions of the brain where it's stored, and then it becomes flexible. It becomes changeable. We don't recognize that, right? It's like a Word document. We open it, even if we make just a subtle little edit, and we hit save, we only ever have access to the latest version. A neuroscientist once said, the best way to preserve a memory is to never recall it.
Knowing that so much of what we remember about ourselves is imagined in the first place because it's artfully reconstructed in ways that we still don't fully understand. And so I think that there's something that happens in the encounter with great fiction that seeds the memory of that reality, that something about all of this is a consequence of the way that it is oriented to certain symbols that express the inexpressible. And we are such symbols. Try to define a person. Try to sum a person up. Anybody. Even the meagerest, most simple person that you could find.
Sometimes people ask me, well, I'm not even sure memes exist.
I sat here and posed for like 10 minutes. Let me see the product. Is that me? No, it's nice. It's so nice. Oh, I've never looked better. Ooh, where were you? Where were you when it was time for senior photos?
Mommy, I don't think it looks good.
It is fantastic. Oh my God, what's that? Is that hyperpigmentation? Just tell me, okay. You know what? I've never seen nothing like this before. I just want you to just keep it up, okay?
And why was Daddy laughing?
Daddy don't know what he's doing anyway. That's how you say that's a great drawing in French.
What are they made of? They're not made of DNA. Well, what are words made of? My colleague Ray Jackendoff, in his wonderful book, Foundations of Language, says that words are semi-autonomous informational structures. Sounds like software to me, with multiple roles to play in cognition. That's what a word is. What are words made of? How many people believe that there are words? Do you believe that there are words? I do.
Neil Array.
Ellen Nabel got sucked in and discovered that hell is one TV show after another. Let's welcome our new
wisdom that, like, depending on the situation, I will. But like vanity is my worst sin. Like, but like this came out. I was on a live stream with Jess.
I don't have like a good conversation with someone for a while. Like it feels like I'm constipated, like mentally or something.
What is mental constipation? Have you ever felt like your brain is stuck in a loop where ideas won't flow and thinking clearly feels impossible? That's mental constipation.
Mm-hmm. And there's a way I can get through it through.
I've never been to Port Hueneme before. Probably some of you feel the same way.
Because as you say, we live in bubbles, and so we each live in our village, but our village is now distributed spatially, geographically, and it's no longer enclosed within the village walls. It's a kind of virtual village, which is.
I don't understand my own creative process. I wouldn't call it a process. But I think I'd like to try to capture. I have a video that I want to make. I don't know exactly what it's supposed to be about quite yet. I really don't. I have an idea, or I have a sensation or a feeling of what it is. I think it's going to be, it's like a thread that sews together all of these different conversations and ideas that I have been thinking about lately.
That time is a money-like resource. You waste time, spend time, invest your time, budget your time. Go around thanking people for their valuable time.
Changes your relationship to time and changes your relationship to your own thinking and allows you to momentarily and periodically extract yourself from the static circumstance in which your routine drives you.
Oh, that's so true. That's beautiful.
Remove yourself from it, recapture perspective in a certain way that allows you to reintegrate more mindfully and perhaps more knowing.
How often do you thank someone for their time? Okay, you give someone time. Robert Half International buys up company, sells them off in pieces, fires lots of people, makes lots of money. And he had his folks, his efficiency experts, do a study of his employees, and he discovered that there was a tremendous amount of theft in all the companies he owned. In fact, what he discovered was that on the average, every employee steals from his company 4 hours and 22 minutes a week.
A woman working from home was let go from her job after being accused of time theft and is now forced to pay $2,000 to her employer. But this has some employees suggesting if you are going to track my every move, then you should pay by the minute and not the hour.
They steal time, which is a non-renewable resource.
And immaterial traces it back to matter meaning wood, that is the basic substance out of which everything comes.
And you start into the wood, you open it up, and it was a nice thick 3-inch piece of walnut. So we resawed it on the bandsaw, open it up, and now you're looking at the grains. And that's where you stop. And you just spent, you get a coffee, you get your pencil out, and we call them negative templates. It's like a little window, and you lay it on the workpiece, and you're just looking for appealing, attractive, beautiful patterns in the grain to then start selecting pieces from. And it's one of the best parts of the process.
Wisdom from William Branch.
Wood is just dead tree corpses.
I think that what happens as a society becomes a powerful civilization, a number of things happen. One is that it overreaches itself, either in terms of its territory or its military and economic power. And in doing that, it needs to be able to control, or thinks it needs to be able to control, a vaster, ever vaster panoply of elements in human life. And to do that, it needs to simplify, to roll out, as we say, a bureaucratic system. And I was training, there was absolutely none of that. So we've got ourselves into a really stupid corner. Right across the field, the encroaching power of administration, the incredible bureaucratization of universities, of schools, and of the lives of teachers, of the lives of doctors, of the police. They're hamstrung by paperwork, by ticking boxes, by meta process. They don't have enough time to give to the actual job of being there, in the police case on the street, and feeling entitled to, to do something about crime rates, and of teachers actually to communicate their enthusiasms about things that they really know about, care about. That's what education did for me. I had teachers who allowed what Plato calls the spark to come across, from the teacher to the pupil. And this can't be done on following, well, it's Monday morning, the 20-something of January, so what we've got to do is this X. We need to, it's artificial stupidity that is taking us over. And it's artificial, so we don't have to obey it. We need to embrace our own capacity for wisdom, which is in a bringing together of intuition and imagination. Reminds me of Shelley's wonderful lines about the imagination, that it can take from reality the cloak of familiarity which has fallen over it and disguised it and prevented us from seeing the wonder of our being. Not fantasy, but true imagination that gets you into the heart of reality. Our only chance of doing so, along with science and reason. So, sorry, that was a bit of a splurge there. So as a civilization becomes too large and overreaches itself, it moves more and more towards a kind of left hemisphere thinking that helps it with the map, the theory, the diagram of life, rather than the actual business of life. And that the sense that there are other things outside used to come to us from closeness to the natural world. Until quite recently, most people live surrounded by nature. Now that is not the case. It comes from a sense of cultural history with stories and myths that are passed down, which are repositories of wisdom. It comes because we are no longer in touch with the body, which tells us about things that are not under the control of our very self-conscious mind.
Because the AI cannot actually detect the quality of its own work. Sure. Humans are quality detectors. Mm-hmm. The AI doesn't have that side of the brain to be like, oh, this thing I made is better than this other thing I made. Mm-hmm. For the AI, it's all flat. It's completely flat.
Is make us think that it's intelligent and give it more credence than it should get. And even if that doesn't happen, what is very worrying is that we are seeing people and even talking more and more like machines. We're seeing people as machines.
Upload begins when you press here.
We're becoming more like machines. The language in which we talk about human functions is now the language of AI. One's data banks and uploading things and in one's mind.
Something that connects up to that broader system doesn't mean anything to you. You did it without even thinking about it. To you, it had no weight, no gravity.
Like in my relationship with my wife, like one of us will do something and the other person, like it's something that you just do unconsciously. You're just like, you just do something. And then the other person will say like, why do you do that? And you're like, do what? And then they'll be like, you always do this. And then like do like an impression of you and make fun of you and like.
But to me, this one little gesture, boy, I've experienced that. I'm gathering that you have too, just by your reaction. I mean, who in a relationship hasn't experienced this, right? It's like you do something, and to you, you're not even, you just throw it out there. It doesn't even matter. But somehow it fits itself into somebody's meaning system, somebody's way of understanding the significance of actions and gestures and what they mean symbolically. And when you encounter someone who has a different symbolic...
Lovely symbolology.
Yeah. Yeah, because the I and the I thou is bound up with the thou. Like it's being afforded by the thou. It's like it's being defined by the thou. Whereas the I and the I it is this fixed identity that is self-constructed. And I think that comes back to the vulnerability piece, because in the I thou, it's like you in some sense have no idea what and virtually no control over your own I.
Because I'm a skeptic. I'm a skeptic of skepticism as well, and I'm certainly a skeptic of cynicism. But, I'm a skeptic of most theories and arguments, including my own. So I think that's a valuable thing.
By machinery that has been designed by evolution over billions of years to do a very good job of telling truth from falsehood.
You can't handle the truth!
And of not drawing unlicensed conclusions.
But the end of skepticism is not to end up in a position that you feel you've destroyed everything, but rather that you've cleared the field of things that are getting in the way. And one of the things that may be getting in the way is the very certainty that such a person might have.
We have wonderful senses too, and we can, but not only do we rely on them, we have learned how to improve on them in hundreds of ways. We have eyeglasses and telescopes and microscopes and all sorts of scientific devices and methods, truth-seeking.
You can't handle the truth!
That is what makes sense. That is the shape of things. Now, unless you have put yourself in the way of experiencing this, I simply can't explain it to you.
So why can't you handle the truth? Why can't you handle the truth? You can't handle the truth because the truth does not have handles. That's it. The truth doesn't have handles. That's why you can't handle it.
Amen, amen. Amen, amen. Amen, amen. Amen, amen.
It's so choppy. It's frustrating. It doesn't like it when I move a whole lot. I guess my computer is not very powerful. I got a weak sauce computer here.
Just got done recording a guitar track, and Tom here is about to put some in-out special sauce on there, some secret sauce.
Oh, I know exactly.
It's gonna taste really, really good when he's done. Get the secret sauce ready.
Is love a product of both the left and right hemispheres?
It's much bigger than either hemisphere. It comes from somewhere very deep.
But it was far from me. That which has been is far off and deep, very deep. Who can find it out?
Below the hemispheres, I believe. And it takes the whole body. And it takes the whole of the embodied being, their heart, their gut, literally, their brain, their soul, their spirit, their intelligence, their everything.
You want to be in a right-brained space. Even this whole notion of right brain and left brain, I find annoying, honestly. I like a different analogy. Okay, I guess there's always been the conscious, subconscious model of things, and that's something that I followed for quite some time, and it seems to fit, seems to work. And Iain, his work, he says a very similar thing, but he says it almost in the opposite way, which is it's more like the superconscious and the conscious. They're both conscious. One is just super conscious. That's your right side. Your right side's super conscious, but it doesn't talk, right? Or at least your super conscious self views speaking and language as inferior, right? It's ineffable. It is a piece of art. A single piece of art can convey more than any amount of words can possibly give to it. So And this is where I'm still learning. I'm still learning about this, but this is my take, right? This is where I'm at, sitting with all this, and that there's something about it being super conscious and taking it all in, because the right sees the peripheral, it sees the whole, it sees the entirety of the situation. It does not break things down into little tiny discrete parts and pieces. The known map, it builds maps. The left side only knows what it knows. That's its limitation, but that's strength simultaneously. Right, the left side of your mind is it is an extremely efficient way of getting things done, right? It's the totes.
So basically, I've got my outcome, so I can run a tote loop: test, operate, test, exit. I know my exit point is she gets the shots and she has an experience of getting the shots that it's okay. Actually, that was no big deal. That's kind of what I want, right? So I went in and I calibrate her state, first of all. First move, calibrate. What does the current state look like? Again, outside of consciousness, because it's an intuition now. Most people don't calibrate state. They're not really thinking on that level. They might be up in their head going, oh no, she's feeling sad. I'd feel terrible if I felt sad like her. And, whatever it will be, none of it's useful.
You don't think about opening the door, right? You go to the door handle, you twist it, you open it, you walk through. You don't constantly walk up to a door handle and go, gee, what is that? I wonder if that's a door handle. Maybe I should test it and try that out. Like you don't. It's because the first time it was completed successfully, your right brain took that and said, hey, that thing means open door. And then it threw it over to the left, and the left's like, great, I like that. That's nice and simple. We're going to take that and store it into our standard operating procedure for how we get things done. Now, I just used the machine metaphor, but I feel that I can't escape it. It gets used a lot.
Or a mountain or a piece of wood, right? As an it's a means to my own end, right?
Yeah.
And versus an I thou is really relating to a overdeterminate other in a sense, right? Like that I am, when I relate to thou as a sunset or as to you or a flower, when it's a thou, there's always this experience of being addressed directly by the flower, by you, this kind of sense of being addressed. And an addressing, not as something that I can consume and use, but as an end in yourself, right? Like that's I thou. And what he says, which is really fascinating, is he says, the I of it and the I of thou is not the same I.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Like,
yeah,
and like because I'm constantly living up here with this person,
yeah,
who is well acquainted with his insufficiencies, and his own opinions. And like there's a whole, like Paul Vanderklee calls it the Consciousness Congress. And man, there's like a whole bunch of these bastards up here, you know, and they just like, no, 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 yes, yes, no, no.
It's not like you write the songs, it's like you catch the songs.
Yes.
It's like and that if you don't catch it, somebody else will.
And one of the aspects of this is, I could put it this way, that the left hemisphere is always trying to close down on a certainty, but the right hemisphere is always trying to open up to a possibility.
And then one day it's snowing, and there's an opportunity to go on a trip. And you say, well, this is it. You know, I'm going to face that hypothetical.
I'm just a Midwest evangelical, talking about God and life and other hypotheticals.
Right? There's something really weird where I do find for some reason the brain is willing to face hypotheticals when probabilities say you shouldn't. And there's something going on here.
And that explains much of the difference between the way the hemispheres see the world. And in these early stages of civilization, people are very open to possibility. And this is a very fruitful frame of mind. They have very few certainties, but they know that nothing will prosper unless they give of themselves. It's no good sitting back and waiting for it to build itself. So
I know that there's just value in the story that we latch onto. And that's again where it's like, I'm trying to learn like what story is going to make a difference. And also, you know, what do I have any story to tell? Like, again, what is a contribution? It's like the given.
Finally finishing up the video. It has taken almost 2 weeks, give or take. 2 weeks, maybe. I can joke about this because Afriel was asking me how long it takes to make a video like this. I can only describe it as an inspiration comes to me. Is the best way I could describe it. Honestly, I don't spend a lot. The few that I've made, I didn't spend a lot of time on them. I probably made them within an hour or more. And I told him about an hour. It clearly doesn't take an hour at all. What a ridiculous thing to say.
And what do you think we can actually do about this?
I have said this so many times before that I have to just repeat myself. But I think it's very tempting for the left hemisphere to think that it's going to understand these things, but that is part of the problem.
It's exciting when it happens, you know. And sometimes it's like fishing. You know, you bait the hook and you throw the line in, and you're waiting and you're waiting and you're waiting, and nothing happens. And we can't control that. The only thing we can control is deciding, okay, I'm going to keep going fishing until I catch the amount of fish that I want. I can't control the time schedule that'll take, but I know the only chance of me catching 3 fish is for me to continue fishing until I catch 3 fish.
There aren't a set of simple things.
Now 10 methods closer to finding the solution because I've ruled out those 10.
We can do. What we need to be is aware of where we're going.
Like preschoolers on the jungle gym. The truth. I want the truth, and only the truth.
And already things like mindfulness, which is almost the clearest example I can give of recruiting the right hemisphere and trying to silence the ever chattering, ever judgmental left hemisphere, and allowing things, as Heidegger says, to presence before us rather than simply be represented in our minds.
Just know, and that's really where probably I have felt more inclined to take religion more seriously than I did years previously, is like hope is justified in situations where it doesn't seem justified. And that's weird, you know, like, because you can't find reasons for justifying the hope at that point. But it's like, but the proof is in the pudding. It's like if you sort of keep going, at some point you'll realize like I can get out of this. So I'm not sure. Yeah, I'm not sure if I'm doing justice to your question though, because
No,
like
this is pretty good.
yeah, but I think
without going one way or other on the hemispheres, is that we are too ready to jump in. We have lost the art of thinking deeply, of pondering, of embracing silence, of thinking in a longer term over a broader span. We're too narrow, spatially and temporally, if you like, in the way in which we think. We're too committed to a point of view that we may never have been taught to challenge, and so forth.
I got to ask myself, what do you do about it? What do you do about it? I think that we should take note of what Dawson does and make some fantastic poetry.
Titled New Year's at Zendo, at the meditation hall. New Year's at Zendo. Zendo for Zazen. Burning incense, stilled silence, cold night of full moon. Pains of stillness, little circulation, sitting until chime resounds. Walk in unison, rotating hall, stinging legs, 5 times striking gong. My teacher gifts blank paper, committing thoughts into flame. Rising cinders, drifting into sky, directing eyes, Orion's belt. And that concludes that poem.
I think people just need to make more art. Okay, I think people need to write poetry, write stories, tell stories, make any art that they can. I think more art is better than less art, in an effort to, in the same effort. Dawson, you've inspired me to write my own poem, and I thank you for that. So I think we need to put out this creativity so that more people are inspired to produce. So I'm going to read you a poem. Sorry. I'm going to read you a poem that I wrote as an inspiration from Dawson. Even though his was way better and way more cheery than mine is. But what are you going to say? I would say that the poem found me. Kind of. I don't know. All right. Okay, so this poem is called A Song from the Red Wind. The sons, my daughters, may your cries be heard above the traffic thorns. Turmoil, ruin, raging swift desire, ornaments of blush and stone exacerbate with eloquence. You know of the water's edge? You den of scoffers, smoke-filled coffers? Are you thought or man? Who do you remember? Forget me when I'm dead. Love in person, eternity at heart. A silhouette, a shadow, a fool looks for things not hidden. A dirty mind, a dirty spleen. Try to count what's lacking. Busy is the modern mind, with masks of information. Dismantle yours, dismantle mine. Stick your head in hidden holes. Venom guards these deepest treasures. Those you must earn, the fool. The cost is far beyond that of mammon. So, there you go. There's my poem. If you got one, cool. Let's hear it. Let's put it on the Friday Morning Nameless, because Chad's looking for new stuff on his show. So,
shout out to anyone down the old world rabbit hole.
Always got trapped in some YouTube loop. Found this particular channel from Earden, I guess. I don't know. You know how YouTube is. It just sends you something real interesting like. So we go over here and we find this crazy video about Satan worship causing the mud flood. Don't know what a mud flood is, but might be like a big flood if you know what I mean. But then there's this Tartaria. I don't know what Tartaria is. So you watch the video. And what do you find out? Well, you find out that there's something called star forts. I didn't know anything about them. Do you? Now you do, and I'm sorry. But anyways, that takes you to this guy's page, John Levy. He's got a really fun page. You can really get lost in some very mysterious things. And of course, that's what I did. Found this really cool video. Mountains or trees in the beginning. Kind of caught me. I don't know. Watch it. It's interesting. And then, of course, you know, there's the actual mud flood. You know, it's an interesting possibility, right? So check it out. But then, you know, of course, you know, we got more star forts. But then the star forts takes you to another place, which I'd never been. And that's, of course, the Library of Congress, right? If you haven't been in the Library of Congress, I suggest that you do. It has so many free little goodies in it that I had no idea.